when you invite someone to a party and they say no, what does our mind do? They don't like me. They didn't want to come. No, you asked a question. They said no. That's all there is to it. Anything else we give as a narrative, right?
Today, I'm joined by Jon Bassford. Jon is a best-selling author, TEDx speaker, and operations expert, helping organizations scale by transforming curiosity into a competitive advantage. With a background that bridges law, philosophy, and executive operations, Jon brings a distinctive blend of sharp systems thinking and human-centered leadership to every engagement. As founder of Lateral Solutions, Jon partners with founders and executive teams to install repeatable systems that replace chaos with clarity. Welcome, Jon. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Daryl.
Yeah, so glad you're here, man. We there's a couple things in your bio that strike me, and we can talk about those as we go. One of those is curiosity, which I live by, and the other one is replacing chaos with clarity. That's always exciting, and hopefully we achieve that at some points in our lifetime, right?
Absolutely.
Anyway, so the first question I start off with, and just to get the conversation going, and we'll just wrap after that. But if you would tell me about an event or a time in your life that caused you to show up for your life in a different way.
Yeah. So about 2 years ago, I kind of hit a wall. I had several things in a business and financial sense crash at me at one time, and before those 2 years, but it got to a point where 2 years ago I was having to throw out the big B word, bankruptcy. I wasn't quite sure what was going on, and I've done a lot of personal work on mindfulness and consciousness and all that type of work, and so but it's been a journey and a process, but I allowed myself during this time to fall into a rut and really have a lot of self-doubt and worry and fear. And something I was reading struck me, and what it did in that moment and how I showed up is it reminded me in that moment that all this fear, all this worry, all this talk about bankruptcy was in the future. That no matter what could happen to me financially in that moment, that single day, that week, I had money to cover. If I had to sell stocks at a 50% loss, and I had, tap into my 401k and cash it out, which you never want to do, but like I had options. The thing that was destroying my daily life, destroying my relationship with my family, destroying how I showed up for work and my clients, was all about a fear of the future. So it was another reminder of how just living in the present and believing in ourselves and just having that grounded sense really turned things around. And the crazy thing is, the minute I did that, I let go of the fear, I let go of the anxiety, I let go of the future. All those things that was causing this turmoil started turning around. It was crazy. I've been at this journey long enough to where I was stopped believing in coincidences, right? Like there's an aspect of the energy that we bring to our lives and our surroundings that absolutely help and dictate, what shows up for us. And this was a pinnacle point in my life that I had to get through. And I did. And it not only did I get through it, but it helped transform and continue my growth in how to show up every single day.
Awesome. That's awesome, Jon. I love to hear those stories. I really do, because, life is an inside job, right? And we have to do the outside stuff, right? We have to pay our bills and eat and blah, 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 blah. And it's funny when you said living in the future, the thing that came to mind for me, because, growing up after 19 in the 12 steps, and they used to say in that time that, if you have, well, number one, they used to say fear is in the future and guilt and shame are in the past. And how they succinctly put that, which I'll put it in the most delicate way I can, is if you have 1 foot in tomorrow and 1 foot in yesterday, you're using the restroom all over today. And I believe that's 100% true. I mean, because I've done that. I've done the guilt and shame, and I've done the fear, and not that it ever completely goes away, but I think what we do is we get a sense of, once you taste the present, and what you mentioned with the mindfulness and that sort of thing, and just that spiritual journey, once you taste it, it's a beautiful thing, and it takes the edge off of future bouts with fear and with guilt and shame. Yeah, have you found that to be true for you?
Yeah, 100%. In the book that was recommended that I read that began my whole spiritual mindfulness journey was Soul Without Shame. And what it does is go a deep dive into the superego, why we have self-doubts, limiting beliefs, even if we are successful and confident, all these things. And what it teaches you is not to combat it, right? Because the when you try to combat negative views, the guilt of the past, the fear of the future, you're giving it energy, right? You're giving fuel to the fire. So it's more about understanding that it's popping in there, understanding it's an unconscious thought that isn't based in reality, and just understanding why it comes in and learning to replace it with what we know is true. I'm a big fan of Byron Katie's, loving what is. So much of what we get worried about and even in our daily lives, right? Like we hear a conversation and we bring our own interpretation to that conversation or that event that happened, which isn't real. It's just our interpretation of it, but that's the narrative we create instead of just focusing on, when you invite someone to a party and they say no, what does our mind do? They don't like me. They didn't want to come. No, you asked a question. They said no. That's all there is to it. Anything else we give as a narrative, right? And so, yeah, I mean, we are haunted by the past, the present, and the future. The present part for me is those lies we tell, those narratives we create in our head, real time. But learning to quiet all of those ghosts in our head allows us to live a more present, happier life for sure.
Absolutely. I had a mentor when you mentioned the combat, and combat is where the combat is, right? And a lot of times that combat is right in here. It's just and in here. And my mentor said to me, and I was probably 19, maybe I had reached the age of 20 at that time, but as he watched me fight life, he said, "Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops." And I was like, "Oh shit, really?" It was just kind of this big sort of, I had no idea. I just thought you just battle your way through life. And apparently that's not the case. Apparently there are other things to do besides battle, through life. So yeah, that's really cool. I love the, one of the things, and we can talk about curiosity, because I wanted to get to that and sort of rounding that out, if you wouldn't mind. But curiosity is what gets us to think differently and act differently and read things that expand our minds and our hearts and our souls and all that sort of stuff. And you mentioned curiosity on your website, in your bio, that sort of thing. And I think it's absolutely crucial. So tell me the scoop with curiosity with Jon.
Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head, right? Curiosity is what allows us to look beyond our current situations and limitations. Challenge the status quo, dream bigger, think of how do we improve things, how do we make things more efficient, more effective. Obviously, a lot of that my work I do is around operations and running a business, but it also applies to our daily lives. Again, you and I both in our own exploration of mindfulness and spiritual journeys, and we both have this curiosity. Where it comes from, for me, it's kind of always been there. It's been innate, but I didn't have the words for it till a couple years back. When I was switching from W-2 work to consulting, I wanted to do a deeper dive into who I was and in the services I was bringing to my clients, or wanted to bring to my clients. And a friend of mine from college introduced me to a colleague of hers who was an academic who helped people to define their superpower. After some questionnaires and interviews, he came back with my curiosity. And to be honest with you, it didn't ring my bell. I see if you do strength finders and other assessments, it's activator, problem solver, analytical, logical, all of these things, how I saw myself, and curiosity didn't really resonate at the time. But fast forward, I was working with a branding company, complete different context, but a deep dive into who I am, what I do, and how I've lived my life and served, worked as an employee. She came back with the exact same words: Jon, curiosity is your superpower. So I really started leaning into that, and it took me back to my childhood. How I was, that inquisitive kid who would sit around at family reunions and talk to the adults instead of playing with the kids, and sometimes even gave me the perception of being a smartass, right? Because I would challenge the status quo, I would question adults. Got me in trouble in high school a little bit, but it drove me wanting to travel to foreign lands and be the first person in my family to go to a foreign country and all these type of things, and the jobs I took, the chances I took. Curiosity has always been there. It really is what allows us to move beyond the human conditions of fear, habit, and comfort to try new things.
Yeah, and we all have that box of stuff we're handed, right? Like, here's your belief system. Good luck, and I think that's, when we're kids, that's what happens. And tell me about the box you were handed as a youngster.
Yeah, so I mean, a couple of things, right? I grew up in the Midwest, Southern Baptist home. I also was a product of divorce. The crazy thing is, I was born a pastor's kid. My dad had an affair with someone who was marriage counseling, and he left the church and me and my siblings, my mom, at a fairly early age, and my mom went on to marry someone else. But that obviously is a big thing that affects kids, and growing up a two-home family. I don't think that's overly detrimental, but it created, I would probably say that grew up not feeling my dad was always present, and always there, and an active participant of our lives, which I think always was some programming that existed. And also, I lived in an environment that had a lot of negative energy, not directed at us, but someone in my life who was constantly down on themselves, never good enough, never smart enough, never pretty enough, never all of these things. In that negative attitude in experience certainly affected me and my siblings growing up. And I've always been very successful in law degree, MBA, managing a $8-9 million organization by the time I'm 36 years old. But I always had that struggle with self-doubt, imposter syndrome, limiting beliefs, and I had to do a lot of work to reprogram that, get that out of me. It's a work in progress. I mean, I still have moments, but it's gone from, before I began this spiritual journey of mindfulness, I would, kind of fall in this lull that could last for days, weeks, maybe in a month or two. Now it's, no longer just a month, not even a week, not even a day, but an hour at most, 10-15 minutes, where I'm able to recognize this, pull myself out of it, reprogram myself real time, by again, kind of the reality of the situation, loving what is, and just really pull myself out of these things. And it makes the world a difference in how you show up for your work, for yourself, and for your family.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that childhood stuff is in there, man. And, my thing was, I was only as good as how well I did in sports, grades, performance in some way. And that was my self-worth. So I'm busting my ass my entire life trying to measure up. And it cost me. It cost me in health. It cost me in addictions. It cost me in, beating the crap out of my body. It did a whole bunch of really bad things to me. And I don't, there's no blame. There's no blame. It just is what it is. And everybody's got their little package of stuff that's over their shoulder and they're carrying it around, right? So, and it's up to us as we become more mature and adults to find ourselves in a position where we're taking 100% accountability and responsibility for everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a difficult thing for some people to get their head around. Do you find that's difficult in your personal interactions and in your business interactions to get people to just be responsible for everything?
Yeah, I think, you know what, again, I think we're kind of programmed to have excuses. We're programmed to blame. And I think partially because we live in a society where we're just constantly in and around negative energy, right? And if we just learn to accept the fact that things happen to us, it affected me, it created this programming that exists, but learning to recognize these things, the things that happen to us. Another quick story is I was in a mastermind run by a husband and wife team, and one of the exercises that the husband does, really a savant at this, it goes into an origin story. Something from your early developmental childhood memory directly affects how you do sales. So going back to my childhood, he quickly, through a series of conversation, like less than 15 minutes, he's like, how did you feel growing up regarding your dad? We were an inconvenience. How do you feel when you're doing a sales or marketing call? I don't want to be an inconvenience. Like, it was that nuanced of how I, something from my childhood. And so, but now it's my responsibility to recognize that and to change that. And one thing I have learned in my work and working with founders and CEOs is I tackle operations, I tackle culture, but the thing that I have to spend sometimes the most amount of time on is working on the mindset of the leaders, learning to let go of ego, let go of control, let go of fear, let go of self-doubt. Having them tap into a growth mindset and some curiosity, that's actually the harder thing to change and get through to them more than the culture and the operations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated by, and I had a sales career, and it was difficult to get through to people and have them change how they think about anything, especially their company. Like, wow, you could save X, and X could be a pretty big number if you do this. And I know it's not in your comfort zone to do that, but if you do this, you could save X. And they're like, I'll think about it. I'll consider it, and I'm like, and I understand, believe me, most everything I ever talk about is because I've been there, right? Like, we've all been there with this stuff. And it's crucial to have been there, but it's also equally, if not more crucial, to move beyond it. And then once we move beyond it, I think it makes a better case for helping other people move beyond it. Do you find that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the problems I have with a lot of the billionaire and millionaire influencers today is that they're so wrapped up in calling people losers, right? They try to motivate by insulting people. You haven't done X, Y, and Z in your life. You're a loser. There's a big time influencer out there, a multi-billionaire guy, who's famous for saying, if you come out and created a $400 million business and sold it, exited, and you didn't go out and create your next $1 billion business, you're no longer successful. Well, we've created this environment where we're defining what success is for one person versus another. And like, the truth is, our entrepreneurship is hard. Being a leader is hard. And the thing I think that gets missed in today's society, in influencers, of constantly kind of trying to goad people into buying our services, our speaking package, our workshops, whatever it is, by calling them losers and unsuccessful, is we ignore the fact that the things that get in the way of innovation, growth, and change are fear, comfort, and habits, which are unique and innate human conditions. We would not have survived, could not survive without those. So, like, it's important to recognize that it's okay to have fear, it's okay to have comfort, it's okay to have habits. We would not exist without them. But when it comes to innovation, growth, and change, that is the enemy. And that's where curiosity comes in for me. It's that ability to look beyond those elements and dare to explore, dare to ask better questions, dare to think outside the box, challenge the status quo. That's how we move forward beyond that. And it's hard. Like, I both have probably been there where we've literally could say, if you made this change, I guarantee you're going to get 10 hours back of your life from work. You're going to increase your revenue by 10%. And they're still like, I don't know. Like, it sounds good. I'll think about it. Right. Like, and it's hard because there's still unknown. No matter what we said to them, they're still we could be full of shit, right? But we could not come to fruition. And there's an innate fear in us to just stick with the status quo and keep what we've always done, even when we know it's not working.
Absolutely. And it's funny because it brought up something I haven't probably said in a while. I probably said it to one of my sons in sales, but and I don't know if it was Zig Ziglar or who it was way back in the day when I used to, throw the cassette tapes in my car and listen to Zig Ziglar. And I had 8 tracks as well, just so everybody knows. The saying was, some will, some won't, so what? Who's next? And that is sales. That is sales to me. And the other thing that was said that I am constantly reminded of, and it counts for life too. Whoever gets the most no's wins, because you get the most yeses.
Right.
And it's about getting out there, right? And that's, there's a metaphorical sort of thought process to that too. Just get out there and figure it out. And it doesn't matter if it's business life, personal life, relationships, spiritual exploration, doing things. The more you get out there, the better results you're going to have. And the more the path just kind of opens up, and you can walk the path, as opposed to, finding the path being either non-existent or extremely difficult.
Right. Yeah. I'm reading a book right now. It's called the Way of the Magician or something like that. But I just got done reading the monk who sold his Ferrari, two of the books in that series, and this one is actually very, very similar. Kind of this fiction story to tell us spiritual lessons. And the book opens with a golf lesson. The spiritual leader guy who this guy hired is being told is a golf teacher, but he really is just a life teacher. But he's having him golf, and he's having him swing, and he keeps hitting it left and right, duffing the ball. And what he ends up doing to get the guy to hit a good shot is to not think about the swing, to focus on the target, close your eyes, ignore the mechanics of the swing, let it happen organically, and that allowed him to hit the ball straight. And that's how we have to look at life. We get so wrapped up in what may and may not work, and how we're doing it, and how it looks to other people, and all of these things, where we just keep our eye on the prize. And by prize, I don't mean money and material things, but the goal, the target we're trying to hit, and just learn to let go of control and all these things. Like you said, things just start aligning. It's crazy when we learn to let go of control. It makes me think of Michael Singer's The Surrender Project. I don't know if you ever read that book or not, but that whole book's about how he just let go of certain things, and whatever came his way, he was willing to do. So this is a guy who owns a yoga commune in the woods, but became a contractor developer, like building houses. End up owning one of the first major electronic medical record companies that sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. And he lives in the woods in a yoga commune, that he took on challenges. He was not a developer. Something came across his desk. He's like, I'll try it, and became a developer. And just learning to just take what the world and the universe had given him, and just trusting it.
That's awesome. I love to hear those kinds of stories, because, and if we look back at our lives, it's probably similarly to how our lives have unfolded, right? Things just sort of, okay, this thing showed up. Am I going to do it or am I not? This thing showed up as a result of that thing. Am I going to do it or am I not? And all these paths, the crossroads and the different ways to go, and the what if, and I never think what if, like, oh, what if I didn't do that? But who knows, right? And that's why for me it's so difficult to, and I shouldn't say difficult, regret is, it's got to be 99.99% non-existent in my life, because everything happens. And I won't finish that by saying for a reason. It's just everything happens. And that's completely cool, right? Like shit happens. And so when shit happens, I either go left or I go right. And that's just how it works. But I was thinking about that the billionaire influencer guy, and he's a little bit stuck in my craw because everybody's got their own journey.
Mhm.
And I can't imagine shaming anybody for where they're at, wherever that is. You know, if somebody decides, hey, I am going to work at this store, I love it, I'm going to do it for the rest of my life, I'm making enough money where I'm happy and I'm content and I'm cool, great. You know, I want that person to have a wonderful life. So yeah, there's some issues there with that, dude.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm an entrepreneur. I want to make some good money while helping people, leaders and organizations grow. Like, I have a goal in life to never fly coach again at some point, right? Like it's a little materialistic, right? But like, I don't want a Lamborghini, I don't want a Ferrari, I want to travel the world in first class. That's one of my goals in life. My brother wants to have a family, wants to spend time with his family. He doesn't give two shits about any of that stuff, right? As long as he has enough to live off of, pay his bills, enjoy his family, and be able to retire reasonably, that's all he cares about. And one of those doesn't make me bad or good or him bad or good. We both have different things of our life. Now, obviously, I care about my family too, and I want my family with me on these trips, but like, we have different priorities in how we view the world, how we view money, how we want to spend money, and how we want to accumulate money. But none of it's right or wrong. We are just all here to be our authentic selves and live the life that we want to live.
100%. You know, my brother, I have a similar situation with my brother. I'm the nut job, you know, he's just chilling, and, you know, he's got a little landscaping business, and he does his thing, and he's older than me, but he doesn't take risk. He doesn't take any risk that I'm aware of. And I'm fascinated by it, you know, and I'm like, dude, sometimes, like, what about this? And, you know, maybe you want to think about that. And I've lightened up a ton over the years, just like, hey, if that's how you want to live, God bless you, man. You know, and I just want it to work out well for him and for his insides. You know, I don't want him to struggle with how he's living. I want him to be content with how he's living, because that's really the key. So we've talked a little bit around success. How has your definition of success changed over time?
Yeah, you go back a couple of years, and I was working with an executive coach. I had a dollar amount. Like, if I made this much money per year, if I had 4 products and services that each brought in this amount of money, like, that's when I would make it. Like, I have surpassed that, by double, triple, because there really isn't an end goal. One thing I started doing, and it came through, I think, through reading the monk who sold his Ferrari books, is I used to talk about things being a journey. The problem with journey is there's an end destination usually. What I started doing is look at playing. How am I playing life? How am I playing to the fullest? Am I being authentic to myself in how I play? Am I serving others when I play? Am I constantly working on improving my game in how I play? That's how I'm looking at success now. Do I want to make good money? Do I want to be a multimillionaire again? Do I want to, never fly coach again? 100%. But I've taken my focus away from that. That's a byproduct of success for me. The success is being able to show up every single day, confident, and what's the word I'm looking for? Just secure in who I am, authentic to myself, and just knowing that I'm doing the best I can. I'm loving my family along the way. I'm showing up for my family in the right way, and I'm doing things the right way to serve my clients and customers that I work with. That is success. If I do that well and right, all the other stuff will fall into place. And that's what I focus on.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. One of my mentors, and I'm so grateful for the mentors I've had in my life, but this reminds me of one of the things he said to me, which is, first things first, and the rest will be added on. And if I'm taking care of in here, which is how I'm playing, right? If I'm taking care of in here, all this other stuff, it's amazing how it sorts itself out, and I love that about living, because because there truly is a way to live. There really is a way to live that engenders or the consequence of is, great relationships and peace of mind and meaning or purpose and, all the wonderful things, health and, even financial wherewithal. It can all be in that bundle of how we're doing things in here. And I like to look at my life as, and I say this somewhat in jest, but not really. What is the product that I'm putting out on the street every day? And the product is me. What am I putting out there every single day in the world? And is it somebody who, I can forget about myself long enough to be good to other people and be kind to other people and pay attention to other people and treat myself well and treat others well? It sounds like, it's very similar to your philosophy of how I play.
Yeah. Being an entrepreneur, I grind, right? Like there's times I grind and I work, 12. I don't work a 9-to-5 job. And I was on a podcast. I was in Charleston speaking at a leadership conference. They built the entire conference around my book, The Curious Leader, and the founder and CEO. This is a hospitality group that has like 30 some restaurants and 13 hotels, somewhere around there. So pretty big company, but they bring in all their leadership from all their different places. And he was asking me, Jon, what is one thing that you're thankful for? And it, as someone who's very, very ambitious in really growing right now and appreciating the playing of the game that I'm in right now, it really made me pause and think, what I am thankful for most is my family. They're the ones who stood by me through those rough years. They're the ones who put up with me not being present, me having a bad attitude when my son would, help with homework and I'm busy working and I get frustrated and snap and apologize to him for how I showed up. He did nothing wrong. It was my actions, right? And it really made me think about the thing I am most appreciative in life and thankful for is my family. And and the more work I do on myself, those changes how I show up for work, which inevitably changes how I show up for them every single day. And that is one of the things I'm really tapped into right now is how I'm doing that every single day, having a better attitude, being more present, and showing up for them every single day.
That's great. Yeah, gratitude, man. I can't. I can't survive without that because it's so easy, especially in today's world, to look only for what we want, only for what's next, only for what's ahead of us, and if I get that sort of thing. And sometimes it's difficult to just be in this moment and, I don't know, look at the sky, listen to the birds, feel the breeze, those kind of things, and wonder how my eyes actually work and who invented that. Like it's fascinating when I pull back and I'm like, man, what an amazing thing, with everything that's going on. Like I'm really freaking grateful. And that's a really cool place to be. We're winding down a little bit here, but for the audience, if you would maybe talk about one small habit that you've added to your everyday that pays big dividends.
Yeah, I'd have to say it's meditation. And again, for people listening, I'm a powerlifting hockey player guy. Like I'm not some woo-woo type person. I mean, I was a philosophy major, so like there's some the ancient world wisdom stuff is in my background from that perspective. But this journey began for me about 5 or 6 years ago, and meditation is harder than it sounds. To quiet your mind, to control your mind. Is things that we think we know that we do on a daily basis until we actually try to quiet our mind. But taking that moment, just centering yourself, breathing into your body, feeling the energy in your body. For the longest time, I did this as an exercise and hoping it would improve my daily life. And it took some time. And I even put some counter blocks for for meditation at I think it was at noon and 3 every day. And I was never doing it. And so I started getting frustrated. So that now meditation became a frustration because I wasn't living up to my expectations of what I wanted. So I finally removed those. But I kept doing the breathing. And what happened little by little is by the repetition of me focusing on breathing and centering myself, I found myself just doing it naturally. And when you do that, it brings those cortisol levels down. It brings the stress down. It allows you to be present, to let fear, anger, anxiety fade away. And you got to start somewhere. And I recommend people to start with to find an app, right? Or go to YouTube, and do a 5-minute meditation that you're guided through it. That's where I started. Now I don't do those. I listen to some, kind of meditative music to kind of help me tap into different energies. But, taking that time to just focus on your breathing, centering yourself, relaxing your mind, controlling your mind makes a world of difference in how you show up to the world, for yourself, for your work, and your family.
Yeah, man, 100%. And I am a big meditator too. And it was difficult when I first started delving into that stuff because I'm like, oh man, I'm come from the Lutheran religion. Am I allowed to do this? And I'm a man, all that sort of stuff. And, it seems like a woo-woo thing to do, but I'm like, I got to do something to chill out. I got to do something to quiet my mind and quiet my heart. And I don't know of anything else that will do that. And for anyone who's, nervous or scared or has an impression about meditation that might be, like it's this weird thing. All it is being present and allowing your mind to calm. That's all it is. And there's a lot of ways to do it, but it's very, 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 very simple. More simple than we give it credit for. So one last thing, Jon, I want to, if you would, tell our viewers where to find you and your work and your book and et cetera, and we'll put it all in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 locations to go to make it easy. My consulting website is think-lateral.com, and my personal brand site is Jon Bassford, Jon, Jon, Bass like a fish, Ford like a car.com, and that's the best 2 places to find me.
Great. Well, listen, man, I've enjoyed our conversation very much, and thank you for sharing your wisdom and your discoveries and your habits and being vulnerable and all that stuff. It's really going to help people, and I know it's helping people out there in your world. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Daryl.
Thank you for joining us on the Show Up podcast. To learn more about me, my coaching, or my books, please feel free to visit my website, daryldittmer.com. DarylDittmer.com. Thank you.